in fact, underlying all that, there are these extraordinary regularities and laws, which maybe we can talk about. And that's what has interested me. And the question that I have tried to understand is, where do those laws come from? What do they represent? It's very much a physicist viewpoint. Are there things that are sort of deeply fundamental that transcend all these different conditions that you just articulated about different planets? And indeed, I would suggest that there are. And just to jump ahead, and they are the idea that whatever life forms have emerged, one of the things, the great challenges life has to face is where we have to be made of huge numbers of components. I mean, whatever they are, some analog to cells and analogs to complex molecules, and they have to come together in a highly coherent fashion, and all kinds of emergent phenomena come from that. And underlying all that is the concept of networks. They have to be networked together, whatever happens. And so one of the things that transcends all life forms on the planet, and I would venture to say all life forms that may or may not exist in the rest of the universe, is the physics and mathematics of networks. And so whatever the forms of life they are, they will obey these laws. Those are the things I have been fascinated about in the last 15, 20 years, because, as I say, despite the extraordinary diversity and complexity of life that exists on the planet, there are some extraordinary regular laws that can be put into a mathematical form and derived from fundamental principles of network design.
Well, why don't we just keep with that theme then? Take us on that journey. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I hope it's not.
Let me tell you about these laws. They're scaling laws, and what does that mean? That means, well, let me give you very specifically. The most famous of these laws is something called Kleiber's law. It was discovered by a man named Max Kleiber in the early 1930s. And what he did is he measured and also gathered data on the metabolic rate of many animals. And the metabolic rate, just so everybody understands, is how much energy an organism needs just to stay alive. So it's roughly speaking, you can equate that with how much food you need to stay alive. So for us, as you know, it's of the order of 2,000 food calories. So how does that 2,000 food calories change when you look at a mouse, or you look at a whale or a kangaroo or whatever? How does that change? And is it just arbitrary and capricious? Because each organism, each one of those animals evolved with its own unique history. Not only that, each subsystem, each organ, each cell type, each genome in that animal has its own unique history. That's what natural selection is all about and evolution is about. And so you would have thought that, well, no, there probably isn't much relationship because, it all depends on historical accidents and so on. Well, turns out if you actually look at the data, quite to the contrary. If you plot metabolic rate versus the size of an animal, size being, say, its weight, mass, you find an extraordinary systematic behavior. And by the way, I remind you, metabolism is probably the most complex phenomenon in the universe, because metabolism is taking a bunch of chemicals and making life. I mean, that's what we're doing all the time. That's,
right.
We use complex molecules to do that, but nevertheless, it is this extraordinary process. And so, despite its extraordinary complexity, the way it scales across all animals obeys a very simple law. And that simple law is very easy to explain. Roughly speaking, it says that if you double the size of an animal, or you look at an animal that's twice the size of another, so it has approximately twice as many cells, you might have expected in the most naive way, if you forget about evolution or anything else, it would require twice as much food. Not true. double the size, you need only 75%. So it doesn't matter if you double from 2 grams to 4 grams, 20 kilograms to 40 kilograms, or 2,000 kilograms to 4,000. Doesn't matter. Every time you double, you save 25%. And that is amazing. So there's this 1/4, this sort of saving of 1/4, roughly speaking, with every doubling. And that's fascinating. But what is fascinating about it that goes beyond that, just that law, is it's true across all organisms in the biosphere. All organisms satisfy that. Or, I mean, you have to look within taxonomic groups, of course. I mean, it's, all mammals satisfy it, all birds satisfy it, all insects satisfy it, all plants satisfy it, and so on. That's fascinating in itself. The second critical point is it turns out anything that you can measure about an organism, about its physiology, something as mundane as the length of the aorta for us, for example, or about its life history, such as how long it lives, how long it takes to mature, how many offspring it has, satisfy similar, simple laws. And they're very similar in their character. It's every time you double, you save something. And what you save, here's even more extraordinary, is always a simple multiple of 1/4 of 25%. So it's just this amazing regularity that is hidden in the amazing diversity and complexity of the world around us when you look around, because when you look around, it looks like there's messy, arbitrary conglomeration of organisms. But in fact, it's not so. And so now going to how we introduced this,
right.
The work I got involved in that fascinated me was to try to derive those equations. Where the hell does where does the 1/4 come from? Where do these come from? Well, it turns out they are derivable from the mathematics and physics of the networks of which we are made of. So you have to, the kind of, cartoon version of an organism would be that we are a bunch of networks. And when you think of yourself, that's what you are. You're a circulatory system, a respiratory system, a renal system, a neural system. Your bones are a network. You can think of everything within that network paradigm. And it turns out if you do that and you put it into mathematics with some caveats, which I'd be happy to discuss, you get these laws drop out. And one of the things that is characteristic that comes out of those equations is that we're also fractals. We're self-similar.
I was just going to ask you if Kleiber's law is fractal.
Yeah. And by the way, the fractality, this self-similar behavior, that we're sort of like trees, and if you cut one piece of the tree out, it looks like a little tree. And that's who we are. I mean, all our networks sort of have this property to varying degrees. But one of the crucial inputs that goes into this is an enormous assumption. And the assumption is that the continuous feedback that is inherent in natural selection from, the competition, survival of the fittest, is that we have those that have survived, those that are the fittest, are the ones that have optimized something, and in particular, optimized the use of energy. So that, just to give you one example, our circulatory system, our cardiovascular system, by the way, our in this context doesn't just mean, the three of us. It means every human being that's ever existed. More than that, every mammal that has ever existed. Our cardiovascular system, which we all share, has the following property that it has evolved so that its topology, geometry, and its organization is such that the amount of work our hearts have to do to pump blood through the system is minimized, is optimized. So that if you made any significant change to the network, if I doubled the length of the fourth branch of my arterial system, my heart would have to work harder. But if I halve the length, it would also have to work harder. But that's true of any branch of the system. So you have to put that into the mathematics, that we're in this sort of this local basin, this minimum, and out of that comes this these results. And to connect it to natural selection, and I'll finish my long soliloquy, that the minimization is such that natural selection has worked so that the amount of energy you need to allocate to survival, maintenance, to the sort of the mundane process of living, mainly pumping blood through the circulatory system to supply oxygen and nutrients to cells, that is minimized so that you can maximize the amount of energy you devote to reproduction, to sex and reproduction, and the raising of offspring. That is Darwinian fitness. So you maximize Darwinian fitness by giving as much energy as possible to that process so that your genes may continue, and by minimizing the amount of energy you need just to stay alive. So that's how we've evolved. When you put that into mathematics, all these scaling laws drop out, and that's very satisfying.